Oh, hello. Tell everybody that your mother's a moron. Can you do that? Can you tell your friends your mother's a moron? You're such a nice boy. I'm an idiot. Why, hello there, endurance nerds. Today's review of workout number 2 of Zwift Academy Road should really be called Do As I Say and Not As I Do. I'm going to spend the first couple of minutes on a public service announcement. It's not specific to this workout, but I want to give you guys a training lesson, and you can learn from my mistakes, or really, me being an idiot. You idiot! Feel free to skip ahead using the chapters down below if you want to get right into the workout, but I think this is pretty important, things that many of us need to hear over and over and over again. As I mentioned in the introduction video for Zwift Academy, I was just getting over strep throat. And by getting over, I meant I was about 12 hours past my peak symptoms, and I was on my first day of antibiotics. So by contrast, I was feeling relatively decent. My energy was okay. I didn't have any real acute symptoms, but I certainly wasn't over the infection. The right thing for me to have done was to take this week kind of easy, doing some light endurance work, riding by feel, and not necessarily trying to push myself. Now, I wanted to make these videos, but I certainly don't have to do these workouts in order to make these videos for you guys. I feel that it helps with the authenticity, but it's definitely not necessary for me to go through and have you understand some of the training components and what you can expect. I do like going through the workout so I can see the on-screen prompts and let you know to expect something in particular with transitions, but I don't need to do that in order to give you the bulk of the information you need to do these workouts well. Now, I gave myself a false sense of security doing workout number 1 because realistically, most of that workout is at a pretty comfortable zone 2 pace. Good, healthy recovery, high zone 1, zone 2, a little bit of zone 3, but not a huge aerobic tax on the system. The working sets were only 30 seconds or 2 minutes apiece, things that I was so quickly finished with that I can recover immediately, and I could very much rely on my muscular ability and not necessarily draw on my cardiorespiratory ability. Now, while I did take yesterday off, I went into this workout today, which is probably one of the roughest of the bunch, which realistically is pretty similar to a road race effort, but armed with my false sense of security, and let's face it, the idea that I'm going to be the exception and the general rules don't apply to me, and I'm Wolverine and I'm just going to recover very quickly from infection, I went into this workout. Then I continued to compound on my mistakes. Now, I got through the warm-up okay. I didn't feel great. To be honest with you, I didn't feel great during workout number 1, but I didn't feel bad. But as I got through the workout and I went through the priming sets and then I went into the first working set, that brings you about a half an hour into the workout, I knew this was not going to go well. I was starting to build up yucky phlegm, nastiness in my throat that I couldn't swallow, I couldn't spit out. So now I'm just hacking like a pack-a-day smoker to try to get this crap out of my throat so that it can clear my airways so that I can actually breathe so I can get through these working sets. Then I'm swallowing this stuff and it's just getting harder and harder to deliver oxygen to the working muscles. I couldn't get my heart rate up, my breathing sucked, and I should have just pulled the plug right then and there. But no, I had to keep going. Not even so much for the video, but because of my damn ego and my pride. No, I can do this, I can get over it, I'll feel better. Let me just get through the next recovery and I can get to the next set. Everything will be fine. And as I move from set to set, I'm using more and more brute force. And by the time I get to the 4x4s closer to the end of the workout, it didn't even matter what I would set the bias at. I couldn't even hold zone 2 without severe discomfort in my lungs. Even right now, it doesn't feel particularly comfortable to breathe. I did that to myself. That was a mistake. And the lesson I want you to take away from this is that you're probably not the exception. When you get sick, you're not Superman or Superwoman. You need to give yourself adequate time to recover. We are just coming into cold and flu season, or the C illness. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that without being demonetized. Many of you out there, especially those of you with kids, are going to get sick once or multiple times over the course of the next 4 to 6 months. Give yourself some grace. Allow yourself time to recover. You don't necessarily have to be prone, laying down all day and completely walk away from doing any exercise whatsoever, because sometimes that can make you feel worse. You need to use discretion. If you have a fever, if you're having difficulty breathing, if you're coughing a lot, take it easy. If you're feeling kind of how I was feeling, where I'm okay walking around, I wasn't bad. I feel like a generally functional human being. A week of just endurance work would have been more than appropriate this week. Don't try to push it, just keep it easy. Now, with that mini roast out of the way, let's talk about workout number 2, fatigue fighter, which for most, if not all of you, will be the most difficult workout of the bunch. Not only from just a total load perspective, but just the structure of the workout. It's a tough one. This is not for the faint of heart. This is really a high intermediate to an advanced level workout. While Zwift does review all of the workout completions for the pro contenders, I can assure you this is going to be one of the more heavily weighted assessments that they use to evaluate their pros. Fatigue resistance is important, especially after a race level effort. So I say that not to scare you, but to prepare you. Many of you may fail this workout or really struggle towards the end. That is okay. You are going to learn something from it. But hopefully I can give you some tips and advice that will set you up for the best performance possible on the day. Now, I do want to talk about the difference between the long workout and the short workout. While workout number 1 had a decent amount of parity and equivalency between the long workout and the short workout, wherein you're doing the same kind of evaluation or test for both, there's not really the same equivalency here. And I don't necessarily blame the designers in this particular case, because it's really tough to simulate this type of workout in the 45 minutes. There's an appetite for the shorter workouts in the Zwift community, but don't think this is just the time crunch version, but will give you the same benefit. So let's take a look at the shorter variant here first, just so I can show you what I mean here. So you can see here that there's a pretty condensed version of the workout here. You've got your warm-up set, you've got one ascending set that brings you from your high zone 3 up into your VO2 max level zone, a brief recovery, then 2 3-minute efforts at FTP, and you get a brief recovery here as well, and then you go into your 8-minute testing set. Now, the purpose of that free rider testing set is to evaluate your fatigue resistance. The difficulty with the shorter variant here is that for those riders who are pretty experienced, you're not going to have built up enough fatigue. You're only going to have 10 minutes of work at or above your FTP. That's not going to fatigue most of you. Now, you could just do a pure 8-minute test here, but it's not going to match the intended purpose of the workout. Now, if you are a beginner, this is probably a good primer and to get you used to doing some sustained efforts at your threshold. But if you are in that intermediate to advanced camp, I don't know if this is going to have a ton of value for you. There may be better ways to spend that 45 minutes of your time. If you only have 45 minutes on the day, but you want to get one of these workouts in, I might skip to maybe workout number 4 and do the high intensity interval training workout in that 45 minutes. You're going to get a good bang for your buck there, and you're still going to check off one of the boxes. These do not need to be done in order. There's no design, there's no progression here that says that you have to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They made a decision, they put them on the calendar like that, but you can do them in any order you please. I would wait, if you really want to challenge yourself to this workout and you're in that intermediate to advanced camp, that you wait until you have some time, maybe on a weekend or on a free evening, go into the full long version of this workout if you really want to test your fatigue resistance. If you want to just do an 8-minute open test, by all means do this one here. You'll get a good solid warm-up and some primers, get 8 minutes in, see how high you can hold that power, and you'll just get a different evaluation. It's not going to be the intended purpose, the name fatigue fighter right there, but you'll still get some good insights. But let's talk through the longer workout, because that is the intended purpose of this fatigue fighter moniker. In the long version, again, they gave a lot of diligence to the warm-up. They gave you about 20 minutes of warm-up here. So you've got that ascending set in the beginning, and then some of your priming sets here at your threshold. So you've got 2 minutes at threshold for each of these intervals here, and that's enough to get the legs and the body used to what you're going to execute later on in the workout. Then you're going to move into your first block of the primary sets. And the first block has 3 nearly identical sets, minus this first one here that has a bit of a zone 2 on-ramp, but they're going to be 3 sets of about 6 minutes, and they're going to ramp you from your sweet spot, 95% of your FTP, up into your VO2 max at about 108% of your FTP, broken into 2-minute increments. So you're going to start 2 minutes at sweet spot, 2 minutes at your threshold, and then 2 minutes at that VO2 max. Then you're going to get a short recovery here, and you're going to do that again, another recovery, and you're going to do that one last time. So you're going to start really putting some fatigue into the legs. Then after another brief recovery, you're going to move into 4x4 minutes at your threshold. So again, putting more load into the system at your FTP. They're going to pinch a little bit. Threshold is never comfortable. If you're more experienced with threshold work, you may have a bit of an easier time, but it never feels great, and you're still putting fatigue into the system regardless of your experience. And then after another brief recovery, you're going to move into the 8-minute free ride section, and that is intended to be done, if possible, above your FTP. Depending on how fatigue resistant you are, you may or may not be able to achieve that. Your more advanced level riders will likely be able to execute that 8 minutes somewhere in their VO2 max zone, so above 105% of your FTP. If you can't do that, don't worry about it. That's tough. 8 minutes at above 105% of your FTP is hard even when you're fresh. So don't necessarily measure yourself against that benchmark, but I would not be surprised to see a lot of the pro contender folks in that range or above. A good target to try to aim for if you feel like you still have some energy left, somewhere in your high zone 4, so at or above your threshold, between that 100 and 105% of your FTP is going to be a very solid performance. You may want to try to see how long you can hold that. Even if you start to drop power and you can't sustain that for the full 8 minutes, that's okay. You're going to be able to get some insights out of that. Let's say you're able to hold that 105% of your FTP for 3 minutes. Then you have to drop down to threshold or even sweet spot. That's fine. You have a data point. You know that, okay, I can hold that for about 3 minutes after a lot of load in the system. You can come back and do something like this again in 3-4 months after a training block, and maybe next time you can hold it for 5 minutes or even the entire 8 minutes. So you can measure some growth as you continue to train and build up your different aerobic zones. And if you ultimately crash out and you have to scratch part of the 8 minutes because you're just completely cooked, that's okay too. This unto itself, this first hour of the workout is solid. You're going to get a great workout. It's not wasted if you can't get through that 8 minutes, but do your best. See how much power you can do. If it's zone 3, it's zone 3. It is what it is. You're going to learn something from that. Now, after you're done doing your 8 minutes that you're going to nail, by the way, I believe in you, you're going to hit the worst part of this workout. The booger at the end of the workout is this horrible descending cool down. It's a very generic block that they have in the workout builder. I'm not even going to bash the coaches for it because they probably didn't even think about it. But it descends you from about 65% of your FTP, which is zone 2, down into somewhere around 40% of your FTP. If you've done that 8-minute segment correctly and you're giving the maximum power you can and you're in VO2 max and you're reaching for every last pedal stroke as you get down to the last 30, 15, 5 seconds, you shouldn't have to go into 65% of your FTP. You should be able to slack right off. That should have just been a 40% of your FTP. So I would recommend, if you have erg mode on, make sure it's turned off before you go into the 8-minute segment so the resistance doesn't kick back in on you, so that you can just recover as you wish, or turn the bias down, whatever you need to do. If you feel like you could follow it, great, but there's no value in it. There's no efficacy in it. It's not a working set. It's not testing your ability to recover. It's just a generic block that they used. It's okay. I'm not going to kick them too hard on that, but just be prepared for that, because you want a recovery. When you're done with an effort like that, you want to slack all the way off. But now I want to talk about a couple of general things and notes about this workout. On-screen prompts, I think they did a great job. Again, this year, I think they put a lot more attention to detail in there, putting in what's important. They're not comprehensive, but I think they've done a great job of really trying to educate people in strategic areas so they understand what they're getting into. I think they weren't as patronizing to their audience this year. They did address them to people who are taking their training seriously. So even if you're just that beginner, but you're reading those prompts, you're going to learn some things in conjunction with videos like this, other videos out on YouTube, other articles that they have out on the internet. It can help you to put together a more holistic picture of how structured training works. I'm going to harp on nutrition again because I'm just a broken record, and I'm going to say it. Fuel for this workout, especially this workout. You are going to be using sugar as your primary fuel source from pretty much beginning to end here. You're working at or above your lactate threshold for the long workout for 42 minutes. That's a lot of load. That's a lot of work at or above your threshold. That doesn't even include some of the tempo efforts in there. So you need to fuel the work accordingly. I would recommend fueling maybe an hour before with a decent carbohydrate meal. Give yourself time to digest that meal. And then when you're on the bike, be able to take some gels or some liquid nutrition or some blocks, whatever your nutrition of choice is, and aim for that 60 to 90 grams of carbs per hour to maintain your sugar stores. This is not a workout you will go into on just muscle glycogen alone. You will fail. Your body will break down. You do not hold enough glycogen in your muscles to fuel a workout like this. Now, I know many of you are health conscious. Many endurance athletes are, and people are sometimes reticent to take on these simple sugars or these race fuels like sugary drinks, gels, goos. Yeah, they're not the best for you. They're not health foods, but they are designed for an intended purpose, and that's workouts like this. Because if you're trying to use something like bananas or granola bars or toast and honey, the body is going to struggle to break down the fiber in those foods and to absorb the sugars fast enough. So you want to leverage those training or race fuels strategically. You don't need to use them every ride, but this is the type of workout here that you want to leverage something that's quick acting, something that's going to pass through the system and be absorbed quickly. Save those more fiber rich or healthier foods for maybe some tempo rides or something a little bit lower intensity. Now I want to talk about cadence here, and I have an entire entire video about cadence that can be very helpful that I'll link at the end screen here. But in terms of the strategy for this workout, I would recommend trying to run these particular intervals that are at your threshold at 90 RPM or above. And I believe there's actually some on-screen prompts that talk about this. But to put a little bit more meat on the bone as to why, especially for you grinders out there are two things that are going to break you down as you're doing threshold work. One is you're working around your lactate threshold, and FTPs are never perfect. So you will be building up lactate in the system, and you'll be forced to try to clear it. And depending on your experience, your lactate clearance capacity, you may start to feel some breakdown in acidity in the muscles, right? The lactic acid burn that everybody talks about is still a potential even if you're not working above your threshold all that much here. But the second piece, and the thing that breaks people down more, especially if they're in that beginner to intermediate phase, is their muscular endurance. Many people can't hold their 1 hour power that many people proxy for their FTP, not because they can't clear the lactate, but because they don't have the muscular endurance to handle it. You can kind of use the analogy if you can lift up some dumbbells. Many people will think 2 5-pound dumbbells are super easy to lift up, right? It's manageable for a lot of people to curl 5-pound dumbbells. Most people aren't going to use 5-pound dumbbells because it's too easy, but nobody can lift 5-pound dumbbells forever. Eventually, your biceps are going to break down and fail on you because you do not have the muscular endurance to do 5-pound dumbbells endlessly. You can say the same thing about your functional threshold power. It's something practiced. You have to continue to do the work at threshold to take on that load, to do workouts that are similarly structured to something like this, be put in the reps, and your muscular endurance continues to extend. Now, why is that relevant to cadence? You create power by two variables when it comes to cycling, because the function of power is force times velocity. Force is driven by the torque or the pressure that you're putting into the pedals, driven by those larger muscle groups, your quads, your hamstrings, and your velocity is your cadence or your leg speed. Every watt that you put out on the bike is some balance between those two variables. Running super high cadence with super low torque is going to have your heart going 1,000,000 miles a minute and is not necessarily going to be sustainable for most people. Having super high torque and super low cadence is going to burn up the muscles. If you don't believe me, get on your bike and do 20 RPM for a simple 100 watts, which is easy for many of you. It's going to be damn near impossible because the torque required without the assistance of momentum and leg speed is going to be very hard on the muscles. And when you're doing those lower cadence, not even ultra low, but somewhere in that 70, 75 range, you are relying more on those muscle groups and torque to push the pedals over for the same amount of power that you would at a higher cadence. And when you're pushing higher torque on the pedals, you are using your type 2 anaerobic muscle fibers. You're not necessarily working anaerobically, but the muscle fibers being used are those anaerobic muscle fibers, which are not as fatigue resistant as type 1 muscle fibers. You have somewhere around 60 minutes of load that you have available in your anaerobic muscle fibers, and that's if you're well trained. Many people won't have 60 minutes of reserves in those type 2 muscle fibers. And for reference, type 2 or anaerobic muscle fibers are what you're using for those heavier efforts that you saw in workout number 1. Very short-lived, very punchy. Even though you're not putting in that level of effort for this workout, you're still using the same muscle fibers. And while you can extend the longevity to an extent of your type 2 muscle fibers, there's going to be an upper bound for everybody. By evolutionary design, those type 2 muscle fibers are not for go all day. They are a survival mechanism. If you're being chased by a predator, you need to be able to get up, run away, climb up a tree, and not get eaten. But you're certainly not going to be sprinting away from a beast for a solid hour, right? So you have to keep that in mind, even though your default might be at those lower cadences, and that's how you climb out on the real road. When you're doing a workout like this, you want to try to spare those type 2 muscle fibers as long as you can. What might happen for many of you is that you'll see your cadence continue to decline as you move through your sets, but give yourself a cadence to attrit into. So start higher, even if it's higher than is comfortable. A lot of folks feel a little uncomfortable with the higher heart rate, the heavier breathing, but if you can acclimate yourself to that, it makes you a more flexible rider when you go to execute on the real road or even elsewhere on Zwift. And lastly, if you didn't learn anything from my PSA, go into this workout fresh. Do this one rested. Don't do workout number 1 and workout number 2 back to back. Give yourself at least a day or 2 of recovery in between the two. It doesn't necessarily have to be full rest. There's no problem surrounding this with some endurance work, but make sure that you give yourself every advantage to be able to succeed through this session. If you're just holding too much fatigue going into this workout, you're not going to be able to optimize, and you're not going to necessarily get a good appraisal of your total potential. Come into this one fresh, good night's sleep, good nutrition, all of the things, and you'll get a good idea of what you're capable of. But I'm gonna leave a couple of videos over here that I recommend you check out. They're going to assist you in your learning journey when it comes to structured training, resources that I didn't necessarily have when I first started cycling, and I made a lot of missteps and just experiments that weren't necessarily the best for my progression early on in my training career, if you will. I think many of you can avoid some of those pitfalls by using videos like these ones, asking good questions, checking out other great content creators out there so that you can really streamline and make the most efficient training as possible. Because let's face it, time is the most precious resource that we have. It's not unlimited. We have families, we have jobs, we have other competing priorities in our lives, and we don't want to waste our time. So I hope that you guys are finding videos like this helpful. Please feel free to leave any questions or comments down below. I'm trying the best I can to respond to all of them. I will get to them eventually, but I might take a day or two as I'm trying to work through them all. You guys have been great in the first 2 videos and responding to them. So help each other out in the comments. If you can answer somebody's questions, crowdsourcing that information is a great idea. Do all the YouTube-y stuff. It helps the video, helps the channels, it helps other people like you to get this information out in front of them. And as always, I'll catch you in the next one. See ya.